So welcome everyone to an interview with the lovely Clare Laverty. Clare is one of my favorite clients, and Clare has had an illustrious career spanning the globe. She's lived pretty much everywhere from London, New York, Hong Kong, Miami, now Los Angeles. And she has worked client side, agent side, photographer side, you name it. She has experience in all facets of the commercial artistic industry, we're going to call it. And Clare has been generous enough with our time to come in and kind of tell us a little bit about what she does, how she works with photographers, and we're going to share a little gossip about some of the jobs that we have worked on together, which have been some of the biggest jobs in my career, which have resulted in some incredible images and great trips all over the world. So Clare, thank you so much for coming on with us. Really glad to have you here. Why don't you get us started and tell us what kind of role you play on specifically, I know you do a lot of work also with videographers and other content creators, but in our jobs, what role have you played? Some of the jobs we've done together have been like Brickell City Center in Miami, which is the redevelopment of an entire city block. That was $1.5 billion project. Where do you come into play in hiring and working with photographers?
So I would describe myself as a branding and marketing consultant. Mm-hmm. So I solve business problems with creative solutions, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I would do anything that kind of involves often taking a brand, building a brand, creating a brand, and taking it to market. And that includes a myriad of different functionalities, from kind of digital work, advertising, traditional brand development, brand strategy, advertising plans, digital media, yep. Social media, yep. Photography, all of anything under that kind of umbrella, yeah.
So would you say a succinct description is that you run a creative branding agency?
Without producing the creative assets myself,
you just
yes.
Gather and curate.
I do strategy and then curate various people that slot in. So whether that's hiring an advertising agency, a branding agency, yeah. A social media agency, okay. Etc.
Got it. We've been working together for almost 5 years at this point on various projects. How did you find me?
So we were looking for a photographer for this $1.5 billion development in Miami called Brickell City Center. It's a mega piece of real estate, and it's a transformational piece of real estate. And it was going to be, an extensive project to shoot. And it was different from a lot of work that I'd shot in the previous years because there was so much exterior and scale. It wasn't simply kind of interiors and rooms inside a lot of the kind of luxury hotels that we've been shooting for a long time at that point. So I knew that we were interested in having a new set of eyes on it and kind of fresh work. So literally Googled the world's best architectural photographers and ta-da. And then you came up, and I just instantly loved your work, and I asked someone on my team to reach out to you, which I believe she did.
Thank you. And I think that was such an amazing project to photograph. And you're right, it did have this wild, almost reflective quality, but it was very important that we didn't photograph it from a hotel photography sort of standpoint. And I think what's interesting about Brickell City Center is, at its core, it is sort of real estate photography. It is marketing Brickell City Center. You have condos to sell and office space to fill, and retail, vacant retail to get rent on. Mm-hmm. You need to not only advertise it to the everyday person who might buy a condo there, but also to investors, to retail brands, to everything under the sun. So it's not like you're an architect and I'm just being hired to get some pictures of a house for you to enter competitions and put in magazines. This is like the kind of echelon of real estate meeting architectural photography, right?
Yeah, it had to land from we always kind of said that Brickell City Center was going to be kind of a lifestyle choice, essentially. Yeah. And so much more than perhaps the typical play on, eat, stay, play, or whatever else someone could have coined. So we knew that we had to appeal from a photographic perspective to potentially lawyers that were going to occupy one of the office towers, or WeWork, or Saks Fifth Avenue, for instance. It had to, and all the restaurants and bars, it had to speak and land with lots of different people, and also had to convert people that were living there in the neighborhood to kind of change their lifestyles. And there had been so many renderings at that point, that really people wanted to see it come to life.
Yeah.
And it was early. It wasn't fully
Well, and
alive
I remember when we shot
it.
there were tarps, massive tarps covering 3/4 of the project.
Yeah.
And we initially shot for 2 days, and it was just one tower and basically one pool area.
Yeah, you shot residential first.
The rest was, there was cranes and construction and hard hat workers going in and out every day. And then I think I came back another year later to do another round, and then another year later to do a third round.
Yeah.
So it was a very long sort of ongoing process.
Yeah, and that's a commitment, because from my perspective, we want a body of work that's consistent and coherent. And you wouldn't want to break photographers in that process. That definitely wouldn't be my choice. It's important to have continuity, because even though you've got the different facets of the building that are for different people, essentially, and for different uses, when you go onto the kind of core website, for instance, or collateral, like, it all needs to look very much like it's come from the same place. And if you started swapping photographers around, you wouldn't get that.
Well, it's also a big risk on your behalf. Like, if you hire the wrong photographer for the first phase of this thing, then do you go back and hire someone else to reshoot it? Are you just flushing money down the toilet at that point? Do you just try to roll with what you have?
I think it's so fundamentally important to the project that the photography is right, that if it was wrong, and it hasn't been yet, I would always say reshoot.
Yeah. Now, what I think was interesting about that project for me in particular was you initially came to me with a list of like 11 or 12 photos, and I was like, hold the phone, pump the brakes. I was so inspired by it that the brief called for maybe 12 shots. We ended up delivering like 24 or something, just because it was so amazing. And I think that's another interesting thing for photographers, is if you're able to over-deliver. I know sometimes you are against the wall in a corner with arrows flying at your head, and there's just no way. But even though the brief called for 12, I was like, this project needs to be, like, if we don't get this shot, we are crazy right now. And you had a list that you gave to me, but you were also open to sort of collaborating, and I would say, I know that we're not looking for exteriors because it's not quite done, but I think I can pull this off right now, and the sun's gonna set over here, and we don't see the construction, you gotta let me shoot it. And you're like, if you think you can get it, go ahead. And I thought that was a very sort of interesting approach, in that you're open to collaboration, not just saying, here's 12 shots, here's what we need, thin.
Oh yeah, I'd be mad to have creative talent on site and try and dictate everything, right? So that's what we pay you for, and you see things that I don't necessarily see. And I think also, to your point, when you came in and shot that, you got some detail shots that we didn't imagine that we would get, or people weren't crying out for. And actually, that one of those shots has been a hero shot of that development for a long time. And it still, sits in the front page of many things. It was that beautiful turquoise. Do you remember the turquoise petrol blue wall in the seat? And it was so
it's
tight.
One of my favorite pictures of all time.
And I think, that's so far from a typical residential sales photograph. And yet, I think it gave life to the sales teams when they get those assets and they can go out and sell with. It just gives them like energy, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. And a lot of this photography wasn't just standing in a corner getting the entire room. It was little vignettes, and those were 10 times more successful than some of the wider shots that show the whole tower or the whole hotel room or whatever it may be. So that speaks to the importance of zooming in a little bit, leaving the 17 or the 24 in the bag, and trying to get something interesting. So let's talk about turnoffs that you see when hiring photographers. What are the kind of red flags that make you immediately skip to the next photographer's website?
Anything that's flat, so like no good lighting, someone that's, lighting is key.
Key, of course.
I know that sounds obvious, but I do see a lot of flat work. Lifeless work, sterile work, work that's not styled well, even in the composition of the shot, which is why you've got such an awesome right-hand woman. So those things, but they're really noticeable if there's something that's disconnecting, like there's something that's not landing well, and then it's very easy to just fly through. A really great photograph kind of draws you in, and you look at it and you can aesthetically appreciate it and kind of get a bit like ooh about it.
do you see a website and say there's no about page or no bio or no headshot? Is that kind of an instant like or do you rely more on the work?
I I believe that websites are reflective of most likely the kind of personality or the way someone's presenting themselves is important to get a sense. So I take quite a lot from that. I remember when I first looked at your site, it was like beautifully clean and simple and well structured and organized. So that immediately gives me some idea about perhaps how you work. And it's not to say that people that haven't done that aren't that, but it is an opportunity to showcase yourself, right? It's a portfolio, it's a piece, it's about you, it's deeply personal.
Yeah, it's a reflection of your personality.
For sure. So, I mean, a lot of marketers, you know, you've often come across, you know, ad agencies and marketers, etc. They're actually terrible at advertising themselves. PR firms are another great case in point of that. But it's a really important thing, I think, to invest in.
So you've mentioned the importance of finding a photographer, but not only that, but getting along with them. At what point in the relationship do you feel like you've got a good handle on whether or not you're going to have a functioning working relationship because you can get along with the photographer, right?
Pretty early on.
Pretty early on, it's like a 5-minute thing.
It's pretty quick. And a lot of that's to do with tone, whether that's on email, the professionalness of that, a kind of, you know, can-do attitude, even if it's a crazy shot list and request.
We've done some crazy stuff, you know?
Yeah,
so.
I mean, when I wrote to you about the China project for Sangha, I think it was like a really short lead time and an insane amount of shots in Suzhou.
I think you gave me a week.
Yeah.
I remember when I picked up the phone, I was at LAX. I had just come back from like Abu Dhabi or something. And you're like, can you be in Shanghai in a week?
Yeah, with me and take 80 photographs.
No, but yes, for you.
Of a holistic wellness resort. Yeah, it's that being kind of affable and like open and being kind of willing to move, you know, quickly. And of course, you just get a sense when you're going through a quote process how flexible someone is or isn't, how passionate they are about the project that you're talking to them about, you know. I mean, those projects were both really wonderful and fairly unique. So I don't think that they didn't take a huge sell, because I think that they're great to work on for anyone. But yeah, you want that enthusiasm for a project. I want whoever I'm working with to feel as passionately about it as I do.
Well, that like, you wouldn't take on a project that you weren't passionate about in the first place. And I think it's important for photographers also to kind of have that mindset. And unless you desperately need the money, the work that you turn down is just as important as the work that you take on. Because
absolutely.
I'm sure you've done this and learned this lesson. If you do something that you're not passionate about and it drags on for months and months, by the end of it, you're just like, white flag, mercy, I'm done. You know, and the same thing is true with photography. And so, yeah, you've got to be selective about what you're doing.
Yeah,
you've got to
integrity and choices, and making sure it's in alignment. Otherwise, I can't really do it, especially in a marketing role, because if I don't passionately believe in it or think it's right or ethical or anything else, then I shouldn't really be selling it to other people, should I?
In the vein of personality, right? I am kind of a person who wants to be left alone. When retouchers and assistants try to email me, I'm like, When you're looking for photographers, do you always kind of have one ear to the ground? Do you get unsolicited emails? Do you like marketing outreach from photographers, or do you want to do the legwork? How would you prefer to be approached or to approach a potential photographer?
So I do get inbound portfolios, etc. It doesn't kind of bother me per se.
I'm the Larry David of photography, so, you know.
I'm typically always just on the lookout, right? So I'm just always on, so to speak, looking. If I see brilliant work or beautiful work, then I log it. So it's kind of I've got it in my arsenal should I kind of want to call on it. Right.
So you kind of take an approach for both. If something really jumps out at you, you'll maybe put it in a file folder for later. Do you keep like a running almost Rolodex of photographers that you'd like to work with someday, but you just haven't found the right campaign for?
Yeah, exactly. So it's all depends on what the fit for purpose. Yeah. So yeah, I've definitely got photographers that I'd probably think about working with if there was the right project to do that.
Yeah. So what is your favorite style of marketing to receive? Is it a printed brochure? Is it a book? Is it just a quick website referral? Do you like to be hit up on Instagram? If you had to pick one that was most likely to stick out to you, what would you say it would be?
So probably Instagram, just because it's such a great platform for a very quick look.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a second, to
Yeah.
click on a link. I'm less probably engaged on perhaps LinkedIn than people would think, because I get a lot of inbound for every single service on LinkedIn all the time, across all the different facets of what I do. So that's just a bit overwhelming. It doesn't feel like a creative space.
Yeah. Every time I logged in to LinkedIn, I have like 300 unread notifications, and I'm like, I just can't even go down this road right now, you know?
Yeah. So I just think from a photographer perspective, but then I'm not really sure. I guess that they're finding my Instagram by finding me on LinkedIn, so then they're kind of converting over to sending me a link on Instagram, if I think about it now.
Yeah, and well, you keep a low profile on Instagram as well, and someone really has to know what they're looking for to find you. Like, what if someone mailed you like a portfolio book and it fell on your desk? Would you be like, this is just too much, or would you find that to be a beautiful thing?
No, probably a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but it's still, looking at a physical portfolio is still...
It's amazing, right?
I still read books, so I'm of that like tactile, physical, tangible nature.
So you think it's important that there's both a digital and maybe a physical outreach?
Potentially,
and both still have value today?
For me, they do.
Yeah.
Although I think I'm quite old-fashioned, maybe.
Cool. Do you look for only paid work on a website or personal work also?
On a photographer's site?
Yeah.
I look at everything.
Yeah.
I look at everything because I want to see if they specialize.
Yeah.
Which is actually important to me.
Yes.
So if someone has, animal and portraits and architectural and lifestyle and cars, it's jack of all trades, master of none. Whereas I see, people that the strength in just a body of work that's in one particular area for sure. Yeah. And then personal too.
Right.
Just because that, again, gives you a bit of a glimpse of their personality.
Yeah.
And especially in the kind of space of architecture or something where there's no human aspect, because obviously when you're looking at photographers that shoot humans, you get a sense of much more life and personality.
Yes. Right.
Whereas with architecture, it's not quite the same.
Right. Well, Claire, I think that is all the questions I have for you today. I cannot thank you enough for giving us the time and coming out and sitting down with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.